Here's the question. How do you make the impossible possible? Simple. Remove the I am, the ego. Now, how do you step into that newfound possibility? With a series of small intentional steps. Never forget, the greatest among us started from humble beginnings. But to truly unlock your potential, realize you're here for something greater. If you're yearning for more than just a good life, let's take that small step together to reach greatness. Welcome to the Greatness from Small Beginnings podcast, where we're talking to those who have gone from mediocrity to motivated, overlooked to overachieving, forgettable to unforgettable. Are you ready? Let's go. Well, hello, everybody. Keith Callaway here from Greatness from Small Beginnings. And I always refer to the small ways that we live, the shorter, smaller ways that we exist and that we are living now, and then reference the bigger, the more, and essentially the greater that our God wants us to be in that. So this is a subject that it's funny. It's kind of about what is a man. That's the general subject. And then masculinity as kind of a sub-subject. And I'm going to go through basically not a monologue, but a question answer time that Charlie Kirk did a while back that was very well done. And I happened to see it recently. It's like, well, this matters. I'm going to use this in the podcast. The reason is because I've talked a lot on this podcast about thinking more, thinking deeper, thinking full thoughts. And I know I've needed that so bad over my life, not to swing into identity, because this is not negative for me. My mom was in the medical field, and I know that she refused to have some doctor create an identity for one of her children. And me being maybe the top of the list, I don't know. But I was easily distracted. I was lucky to get anything more than a C at school. And what that would indicate is that, like, I was distracted. I had what they called at the time hyperactivity, what they call now ADD or ADHD, and I probably would have qualified for that label. But sadly, I would have qualified for that label. But thanks to my mom, I was not labeled with that. She's like, nope, he's going to be fine. A boy is a boy, and not all boys are like this, but in her experience, boys were often distracted, and that I was going to be fine. And I did. Actually, most of the way through my sophomore year, I had a kind of a spiritual awakening, a revelation that happened in like April of my sophomore year of high school. And that awakening in me changed me so much that I needed to do better in school. So it was a focus thing. I did. I had a pretty bad GPA to finish my sophomore year, because April, May, and that little week of June or whatever it was not enough to get my GPA up to a really good level. But it was below 2 when I was there, which is C average. And some of the classes, of course, were worse. Some were better. I liked them more, so I was better at them. But part of that awakening helped me decide that I needed to focus and I needed to do better. I was compelled ethically and morally because I had changed spiritually. I was in the process of changing spiritually. And so I was capable. I just didn't apply myself. I was too distracted. I would look out the window. I was watching outside, and it was more fun to do that. I always cared about fun. I still care about fun, even in my 60s. But I could have been labeled ADHD, probably something like that. But my mom refused. And yet, so many people of my generation have allowed their kids to be labeled. And then the generation half down, people in their 20s nowadays, or teens, are being labeled constantly. And now that label has become part of their identity. Well, that's where I swing in this, what is a man? And it happens to be after Thanksgiving, but before Christmas. And I love this time of year, and I love it in a feelings kind of way. I love Christmas time. My wife loves it more than any. I call her the crazy Christmas lady, and she loves it more than anybody else I know. And we watch Hallmarks, and we cry at movies, and we talk about how fun it is to have the joy of our grandchildren when they see the lights on trees and different light displays we go to, and we love that. So December is a very feelings time. And then I heard this video the other day, and I thought, oh man, I don't need to feel less. But I do need to reason and think more. So back to the reason for the season, which is Jesus. Um, I need to consider him and deeper. Okay, that's the preliminary comments. That's the opening of this. What is a man? In the conversation that Charlie Kirk had with somebody regarding masculinity, and the guy was questioning, well, what is a man? Like, what are the things that you consider masculine, manly? And the first one is that hits hard and deep really fast. That self-control over fleshly desires. I had to write it down to make sure I got it right. And I heard a sermon from a guy down in Jacksonville recently, and he admitted, hey, man, the things I struggle with at 16 years old, I still struggle with. Yeah, in a different way, but I really thought, because he's just turned 50, I really thought when I was 50, not only would I be old, but my spiritual life would keep me off the ground. Like I'd be in the clouds, and I wouldn't have to worry about the basics of sin in my life and all these things that frustrate me and bring me down. But that's not the case at all. And that's the same in my life. It's frustrating and yet true that I have not figured a lot out in 50 plus years. That the things that I was struggling with at 10, I always talk about the 8-year-old that felt uh, not enough, incomplete. I remember a vacation I took um, back in the day. I was 4 or 5 years old, and I wasn't enough. There was no one my age all the way along the way. We drove to Texas and drove back to Oregon, and it was a lot of time in the car and time with cousins, brothers, sisters, and there was nobody my age, and I never felt like enough. And I remember that feeling very intensely. And then the 8-year-old that was called the short shrimp and whatever, because I was a very small kid for a long, long time. Not much growth really until I was in high school. I started high school at 4'11", and I played football. And they combined the varsity and the junior varsity and the freshmen all together for practice. And man, did I get run over a lot. But I hung in there. Like, I was stubborn. I had a chip on my shoulder because of that short thing. But I still struggle with some of the same things. And so, to Charlie Kirk's point, self-control over your fleshly desires. We need self-control. We need to deny ourselves. We need to not be comfortable or fleshly in the moment. And I'll get to some of that in a minute. We need to control our fleshly desires. That is a manly thing to do. Now, women have to do the same thing on their side, but the point is, what does it take to be a man? A boy does these things, but a man controls himself. Two, an attitude of courage. almost heroism, but an attitude of courage toward defending those who can't defend themselves. And I remember that rearing up in me when I was maybe not even 10 years old. And I've had that intensely. I, to this day, much prefer, if not demand, that I face the door when I'm sitting. I always, when I walk through a restaurant, I always observe what's going on there. Who's there? And what do they look like? And what can I observe? Not that I have to remember what they observe, but what if something happens? What if someone marches in with a gun? What if, and I actually picture these things. I want to see what's coming for the sake of the person or people I'm with and this. And when I'm sitting and eating with a restaurant, or I'm sitting in church, or I'm at home with my entire family, or any other place, maybe I'm at the zoo or other places looking at Christmas lights. If I'm in a common situation with people, those are my people. I must protect. I must. And I have an attitude of courage towards defending those who can't defend themselves, or, and that's circumstantial. Maybe they could in a different circumstance, but certainly unborn babies, certainly uh, young girls and boys that are trafficked. I I have a heart for that, and am not engaged deeply in it, but I have a heart for that. It's tragic. So be a hero, I guess, is kind of what that one is. So first, self-control over your fleshly desires, and then an attitude of courage. Be a hero toward defending those who can't defend themselves. Three, fostering a family you lean towards godly purposes. And the fact is that the less godly the father is, the more likely it is for the whole family to struggle. Now, the facts show that any father in the home that has any kind of guidance is still better from a statistically. Less kids in prison, less anxiety, less depression, especially in boys, but in the whole family. And then a marriage that stays together, those numbers even come down further. But if you want real success, you foster leaning your family towards godly purposes. The less godly that process is an eternal problem, and it's going to have to be dealt with someday. But I do believe that it'll create a gratefulness that actually, if you do a good job, even if it's a godless job, that it's going to lean you towards, by nature of who God made us to, it's going to lean you towards the good things. And eventually, I believe that everybody then has a chance to figure it out, to be grateful and thankful and humble in that process, and then see what's on the other end for them, and for, let's see, not just for them, but for their family, for those around them, for that hero thing. So I believe that's a super important one. The question came back to Charlie when he was talking about this in this conversation, is what if somebody doesn't connect with God? And he says, okay, that's okay, but let's answer the question, but then by which standard then do we define good and bad, good and evil, good and not so good? What do we then define that by? And I think it's really important to dig in on that subject and figure out, what do we define these things by, and come up with a standard through, what's the term I want to use, through reason, not just feelings that you create standard, but reason and thinking. What kind of, for me, I look out at my great great grandkids who will not meet me. If they do, they're going to be a baby and I'm going to be very old. But what standard have I created within the family that's come from my father and his father before him that I need to pass along? It's good to have standard. And Charlie Kirk is making the point that it's easier, it's better, and more uh, contiguous. It's continuing to have a standard that is above you, which is God, which is the Bible. And he says, the best way to do that is read the Bible every day. And he's not wrong. And then how does he act? Based on the standard, how does that man act? Number three is lean your family towards a towards God, godliness. Well, then how do you act? Do you go to church? That's not the key to the whole life. It's not. But do you have a moral compass, an ethical compass that says, no, selfishness is wrong, pride is wrong, pride, and we're going to teach you as children to get through this and to learn it differently. And that means repeating over and over again, as you parents already know, that you have to repeat things dozens of times before the kids start to understand and get it. So he references, for those of you that care enough, Genesis 12, where he's talking to Abraham. God's talking to Abraham, says, leave your home and go on an adventure for God. That's not the way God put it. And not just an adventure for God, but finding his purpose in it. And that is the true adventure. And that's, I think, what Charlie's getting at, is that adventure is bigger, more amazing, and more fulfilling than any adventure you could ever have, is to be in this world and on this world doing your purpose, that the one that made you put you here to do. And I haven't always found that. I know that I've done certain things, I've built a great business along with some others, and but there's way, way more to do. And I'm looking forward on certain things to get started. I'm already doing some things and looking forward to doing more. Number 4, about being masculine, picking the fights the rest of society should not be involved in. It's military. It's things out of society where we need to right the wrongs, where we need to step in sometimes when things are going on. When the gal on the subway is getting stabbed, we maybe we can't save her, but we need to subdue that guy because he's being wrong. He's being so wrong and evil in that moment, and that evil has to stop. How do we do that? I'm not exactly sure, but we have to stop it. The fights, again, some of these other things, abortion, uh, perpetual homelessness, drug addiction. How can we help? We can't fix it all, but how can we help? And thankfully, I've had a few successes in my life in the addiction world. Haven't had many in the trafficking world, and not much in the abortion world, the unborn child world. But maybe someday, maybe someday. And then, kind of with that, I call it 4A. So picking the fights that the rest of the society should not be involved in. 4A, do what we ought to do, not just what we want to do. So be uncomfortable, do the duty rather than do things the easy way. And I appreciate the blue collar world. I've been in it all my life. And I appreciate those men that go to work and they work hard, and they do a lot for their families. And man, I'm grateful for the blue collar part of this world and what it's taught me. I've got 6 sons and a son and 3 grandsons now, and hopefully more coming. I don't know. But they need to see good examples. Somebody that's willing to do the uncomfortable thing, even at my age, do the uncomfortable thing, do hard stuff. Maybe that's run like what I did a few months ago, run 29 miles as a fundraiser. Maybe that's go run out in the middle of the wilderness with my son to get him to pace him through a very, very long run. Maybe it's going to work in a hard situation for a year at a time. I've done that multiple times also, where I literally every day was hit so hard that I want to give up. Some of those have been recent, and it's stay with it. It's uncomfortable and it's hard. You have duty. Go do it. Then number five, he didn't actually name it that, but in part of the discussion, he basically alludes to this reason over feelings. And let's call it reason equals calculation, like do the math. And then, let's call it duty. Let's call it thinking, deep thinking, and then make a decision without all the information, without all the feelings taken into account. I'm a very feeling person, so I'm going to feel first. For me, this is a difficult thing to have reason and calculation, but I will tell you the older I get, the more I do of it because I don't want us to make some of the same mistakes. I don't want to drag others down. I want to do better, which means I need to do better. I need to think deeper and make decisions based on the Bible, on scripture, on things that are bigger than me. And then number six, if you want to get closer to God, which is referred to, um, in number three, fostering that godly relationship. If you want to get closer to God, stop doing sinful things because they muddy your mind. Just picture a young person wanting to get closer to God, they say, and yet they go out drinking. They drink at the football, at the sport events, uh, and they're drunk for hours every week, hours and hours. How is that a pathway to getting closer to God? It's like a complete mind numbing and distracts you. Well, a lot of us do the same thing. We scroll for hours at a time. I've been hooked. I know what it's like, and we need to stop. I've had to determine that there's certain spots, even on Facebook, that I won't go to. I just won't. And if I do, it's oh yeah, I remind myself, I'm not supposed to do that because it sucks me in, especially some of the stuff that I really shouldn't be watching. That sucks me in faster than the stuff that's really good. They're very human. A good rule of thumb, we just talked about it this last week. I told one of my kids, one of them said to the other, "Do you remember what dad used to say to you? If you really, really want to do it, you shouldn't. Then don't," I guess is how it went. If you really, really want to do it, then don't. And that is a very human condition. And that's exactly how we should respond. That's exactly how we should live our lives. If you really want to do it, don't. Because it's probably, not probably, it's almost definitely against you. It has nothing to do with the other things I've talked about here about being a man. Then he goes into feminism. The next question in the dialogue was about feminism and how women want to be like men, so they give their bodies to men and it destroys them. It gives them anxiety and they need therapy and all the stuff that comes out of that. And feminism is an exact affront to masculinity and femininity. And I can't say that loud enough or hard enough. That we have to pay better attention to what the world is feeding us. So that section about doing the sinful things and feeding fleshly desires, that's the antithesis of living by feeling and not being a thinking person. Oh, again, I can feel things in the Christmas season. I can do things that create feelings and enjoy massive enjoyment. And I shouldn't squelch those things. I need to live in those moments with my kids, my grandkids, other people, with my wife, and watch the wonder and be emotional about it. But I do need to be careful that the emotion is not what's running me. I need to be careful, and so do you. So, the family out there. So that's the pathway to greatness. The small part of that is us feeling so much and then reacting to our feelings. I heard a reel today that counteracts this, that, hey, we need to go out and we need to do certain things, and then we're gonna feel like we accomplished what we were supposed to accomplish. And no, no. When we go out and do the right thing, then we will know through resolve, through thinking, through um, calculation that we've done the right thing, and that doing things morally and ethically correct, leaning myself and my family and others towards God, is the actual thing that we need to be doing. I am done holding back on that as a concept in this podcast and other places. I'm going to do what God says. I'm going to do what God tells me to do. And some of it is feeling. Yes. Some of it is by the Spirit, and it is very feeling. And some of it is by the Spirit, and it is very thinking. And I need to do that and be that. So that is one of the the on-ramps on, and one of the lanes on the pathway to greatness. Multiple lanes on that pathway, but this is the lanes you've got to get into. Self-control over fleshly desires. An attitude of courage, be a hero toward defending those who can't defend themselves, fostering your family towards godly purposes and towards eternal correctness, picking the fight with that the rest of society should not be involved in, doing what ought to be done out of duty and compulsion because you know it's right and good. Reason over feelings, reason, calculation, thinking, deep thinking. If you want to be closer to God, stop sinning. Stop doing what's wrong, feeding your flesh, and stop living by feelings, but instead by reason and thinking. And you can't, feelings are going to come into that. For me, they're going to come into that always. Every time I make a decision, every time I talk about what's moral and ethical, I have to take into account love for God and love for others. I have to, and I will. And those are very feeling things. But love is also action. And while we're taking action, things do reveal themselves in a more full sense. Now, I'm going to get on, and I'm going to do the quote that I always do when I'm finishing one of these podcasts. You were designed for accomplishment. Yes. Engineered for success. Yes, especially with a godly path, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. You have it in you. You just have to think and be and do. And in the process, you do feel. You were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. Now, this is your choice. Now go be great.